Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as Peter Coonan, was an English serial unaliver who was convicted of unaliving 13 women and attempting to unalive 7 others between 1975 and 1980. He was dubbed in press reports as the Yorkshire Ripper, alluding to Jack the Ripper. He was sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment, which were converted to a whole life order in 2010. 2 of Sutcliffe's unalivings took place in Manchester. All the others were in West Yorkshire. Sutcliffe initially attacked women and girls in residential areas, but appears to have shifted his focus to red light districts because he was attracted by the vulnerability of the perceived ambivalent attitude of police to women's safety. After his arrest in Sheffield by South Yorkshire Police for driving with false number plates in January 1981, he was transferred to the custody of West Yorkshire Police, who questioned him about the unalivings. At his trial, he pleaded not guilty to unaliving on the grounds of diminished responsibility, but he was convicted of unaliving by a majority verdict. Following his conviction, Sutcliffe began using his mother's maiden name of Coonan. The search for Sutcliffe was one of the largest and most expensive manhunts in British history. West Yorkshire Police faced heavy and sustained criticism for their failure to catch him despite being interviewed 9 times in the course of the 5-year investigation. Owing to the sensational nature of this case, the police handled an exceptional amount of information, some of it misleading, including hoax correspondence purporting to be from the Ripper. Following Sutcliffe's conviction, the government ordered a review of the investigation, conducted by the Inspector of Constabulary, Lawrence Byford, known as the Byford Report. The findings were made fully public in 2006 and confirmed the validity of the criticism in the force. The report led to changes to investigative procedures that were adopted across UK police forces. Since his conviction, Sutcliffe has been linked to a number of other unsolved unalivings and attacks. Sutcliffe was transferred from prison to Broadmoor Hospital in March 1984 after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. The High Court dismissed an appeal by Sutcliffe in 2010, confirming that he would serve a whole life order and never be released from custody. In August 2016, it was ruled that he was mentally fit to be returned to prison, and he was transferred that month to HM Prison Falkland in County Durham. Sutcliffe was deceased in hospital while in prison custody in 2020, aged 74. Peter Sutcliffe was born on the 2nd of June 1946 to a working-class family in Yorkshire. His parents were John William Sutcliffe and his wife Kathleen Frances Coonan. Kathleen was a Roman Catholic and John was a member of the choir at the local Anglican Church of St. Wilfrid's. Their children were raised in the mother's Catholic faith, and Sutcliffe briefly served as an altar boy. Sutcliffe was a premature baby, having to spend 2 weeks in hospital, and his mother was the victim of domestic abuse, making it likely she struggled through her pregnancy under great emotional stress. Sutcliffe's father was a heavy drinker who once smashed a beer glass over Sutcliffe's head for sitting in his chair at a Christmas table when he was 5. John Sutcliffe also hated his mother. He would frequently dismiss the slightly built Peter as Sutcliffe's mother also lavished attention on her son and was to become seen by Sutcliffe as perfect. John would also whip his children with a belt as a form of punishment. Sutcliffe's siblings later described their father as a monster, and according to Sutcliffe's younger brother, when he was 4, Sutcliffe was sent to St. Joseph's Catholic Primary School, where he was severely bullied. In 1970, Sutcliffe's father posed as his wife's lover in order to lure her to a local hotel and took Sutcliffe and 2 of his siblings to witness him expose her infidelity. When Kathleen arrived, Sutcliffe's father pulled out a negligee from his mother's purse as her children watched. In his late adolescence, Sutcliffe developed a growing obsession with voyeurism and spent much time spying on women and men seeking their services. Reportedly alone, Sutcliffe left school at 15 and had a series of menial jobs, including 2 stints as a gravedigger at Bingley Cemetery in the 1960s. Because of his occupation, he developed a macabre sense of humour. Co-workers reported that Sutcliffe enjoyed his work too much and would even volunteer to do overtime washing the corpses. Between November 1971 and April 1973, Sutcliffe worked at the Bard television factory on a packaging line. He left this position when he was asked to go on the road as a salesman. After leaving Bard Television, Sutcliffe worked night shifts at the Britannia Works of Anderton International from April 1973. In February 1975, he took redundancy and used half the £400 payoff to train as a HGV driver. On the 5th of March 1976, Sutcliffe was dismissed for the theft of used tyres. He was unemployed until October 1976, when he found a job as an HGV driver for T&WH Clark Holdings Limited on the Canal Road Industrial Estate in Bradford. Sutcliffe met 16-year-old Sonia Suma, the daughter of Ukrainian and Polish refugees from Czechoslovakia. On the 14th of February 1967, at Royal Standard Pub on Manningham Lane in Bradford's red light district, they married on the 10th of August 1974. Sonia was studying to become a teacher when she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Her relationship with her husband was later characterised by writer Gordon Byrne as domineering, with Sonia willing to slap him down. Barbara Jones, a journalist who also had many conversations with Sonia, described her as Sonia had several miscarriages and they were informed that she would not be able to have children. She eventually resumed her teacher training course, during which time she had an affair with an ice cream van driver. When Sonia completed the course in 1977 and began teaching, she and Sutcliffe used her salary to buy a house at 9 Garden Lane in Heaton, into which they moved on the 26th of September 1977, and where they were living at the time of Sutcliffe's arrest. Sutcliffe's first documented assault was of a female worker, whom he had met while searching for another woman who had tricked him out of money. He left his friend, Trevor Birdsall's minivan and walked up St Paul's Road in Bradford until he was out of sight. When Sutcliffe returned, he was out of breath, as if he'd been running. He told Birdsall to drive off quickly. Sutcliffe said that he followed a female worker into a garage and hit her over the head with a stone in a sock. According to this statement, Sutcliffe said, police visited Sutcliffe's home on the next day as the woman he had attacked had noted Birdsall's vehicle registration plate. Sutcliffe admitted that he'd hit her but claimed that it was with his hand. Police told him that he was very lucky as the woman did not want to press charges. Sutcliffe committed his second assault on the night of the 5th of July 1975 in Knightley. He attacked 36-year-old Anna Rogalskiv, who was walking home, striking her unconscious with a hammer and slashing her stomach with a knife. Disturbed by a neighbour, he left without unaliving her. Rogalskiv survived after brain surgery, but she was psychologically traumatised after the attack. She later said, on the night of the 15th of August, Sutcliffe attacked 46-year-old Olive Smelt in Halifax. Employing the same modus operandi, he briefly engaged Smelt with a commonplace pleasantry about the weather before striking hammer blows to her skull from behind. He then disarranged her clothing and slashed her lower back with a knife. Again he was interrupted and left his victim badly injured but alive. Smelt subsequently suffered severe emotional and mental trauma. Smelt later told Detective Superintendent Dick Hollard that her attacker had a Yorkshire accent, but this information was ignored as the fact that neither she or Rogalskij were in towns with a red light area. On the 27th of August, Sutcliffe attacked 14-year-old Tracy Brown in Silsden, attacking her from behind and hitting her on the head 5 times while she was walking along a country lane. He ran off when he saw the lights of a passing car, leaving his victim requiring brain surgery. Sutcliffe was not convicted of the attack but confessed in 1992. Brown later said that she had been charmed by Sutcliffe at first. The first victim to be unalived by Sutcliffe was 28-year-old Wilma Mary McCann on the 30th of October. McCann from Scott Hall was a mother of 4 children. Sutcliffe struck the back of her skull twice with a hammer and then inflicted At 7:30 p.m, she was last seen leaving her council house on Scott Hill Avenue, in the Chapelton area of Leeds, walking past the nearby Prince Philip playing fields. An extensive inquiry involving 150 officers of the West Yorkshire Police and 11,000 interviews failed to find the culprit. In December 2007, McCann's eldest daughter passed away to suicide, reportedly after years of anguish and depression over the circumstances of her mother's passing. Sutcliffe committed his next unaliving in Leeds on the 20th of January 1976 when he stabbed 42-year-old Emily Monica Jackson 52 times. In dire financial straits, Jackson had been persuaded by her husband to engage in work, using the van of their family roofing business. Sutcliffe picked up Jackson, who was soliciting outside the Gaiety pub on Roundhay Road, then drove about half a mile to some derelict buildings on Enfield Terrace in the Manor Industrial Estate. Sutcliffe hit her on the head with a hammer, dragged her body into a rubbish-strewn yard, then used a sharpened screwdriver to stab her in the neck, chest and abdomen. He stamped on her thigh, leaving behind an impression of his boot. Sutcliffe attacked 20-year-old Marcella Claxton in Roundhay Park on the 9th of May. Walking home from a party, she accepted an offer for a lift from Sutcliffe. When she got out of the car to urinate, he hit her from behind with a hammer. Claxton survived and testified against Sutcliffe in his trial. At the time of this attack, Claxton had been 4 months pregnant and subsequently miscarried the baby. She required multiple extensive brain operations and had intermittent blackout and chronic depression. On the 5th of February, Sutcliffe attacked 28-year-old Irene Richardson, a Chapelton worker in Roundhay Park. Richardson was last seen at 11:15 p.m. leaving a rooming house on Cowper Street, saying that she was going to Tiffany's, a pub and disco in the centre of Leeds. Richardson was bludgeoned to unaliving with a hammer and had been stabbed 3 times in her stomach. Once she had passed away, Sutcliffe mutilated her corpse with a knife. Tyre tracks left near the scene resulted in a long list of possible suspect vehicles. On the 23rd of April, Sutcliffe unalived 32-year-old Patricia Tina Atkinson Mitra, a worker in her Bradford flat, where police found a boot print on her bedclothes. According to Sutcliffe, he picked Atkinson up in Manningham, Bradford, before driving to her residence. He then hit her on the back of the head 4 times to incapacitate her. He then stabbed her 6 times in the stomach with a knife. On the 25th of June 1977, a 16-year-old Jane Michelle MacDonald went to meet friends at the Hofbräu House, a German-style beer keller in Leeds. She missed the last bus home and went back to a friend's house to wait for her sister to bring her home. After 45 minutes or so, she ended up walking home, where she was attacked by Sutcliffe in Reginald Street, Leeds, at around 2 a.m. Her body was discovered the following morning at 9:45 a.m. by children in the playground between Reginald Terrace and Reginald Street in Chapelton. A post-mortem was carried out by the Home Office pathologist Professor David Gee. The extent of her injuries was not revealed by the time by police, although it was subsequently revealed that she had been hit on the head 3 times with a hammer and had been stabbed in the chest and back. A broken bottle was found embedded in her chest. On the 10th of July 1977, Sutcliffe assaulted 43-year-old Maureen Long in Bradford. Long was leaving a nightclub when Sutcliffe offered her a lift home. Long stopped to urinate and Sutcliffe struck her at the back of the head, knocking her out. Long was suffering from hypothermia when found and was in hospital for 9 weeks. A witness misidentified the make of Sutcliffe's car, resulting in more than 300 police officers checking thousands of cars without success. On the 1st of October 1977, Sutcliffe unalived 20-year-old Jean Bernadette Jordan, a worker from Manchester. Shortly after 9 p.m, Sutcliffe was cruising the area of Moss Side when he picked up Jordan. After they arrived in Princess Road near the Southern Cemetery, Sutcliffe hit Jordan once in the head before proceeding to hit her 10 more times. In a later confession, Sutcliffe said that he realised the new fire he had given to Jordan was traceable. After hosting a family party at his new home, he returned to the wasteland behind Manchester's Southern Cemetery, where he had left the body but was unable to find the fiver. On the 9th of October, Jordan's body was discovered by a local dairy worker and future actor Bruce Jones, who had an allotment on land adjoining to the site and was searching for house bricks when he made the discovery. The fiver, hidden in a secret compartment in Jordan's handbag, was traced to branches of the Midland Bank in Shipley and Bingley. Police analysis of bank operations allowed them to narrow their field of inquiry to 8,000 employees who could have received it in their wage packet. Over 3 months, the police interviewed 5,000 men, including Sutcliffe. The police found that the alibi given for Sutcliffe's whereabouts that he had attended a family party was credible. Weeks of intense investigations pertaining to the origins of the fiver led to nothing, leaving investigators frustrated that they collected an important clue but had been unable to trace the actual firm to which or whom the fiver had been issued. On the 14th of December, Sutcliffe attacked Marilyn Moore, a 25-year-old worker, in the back of his car on waste ground in Scott Hall, Leeds. Sutcliffe lost his balance while delivering a blow to Moore with a hammer, allowing Moore to escape with severe head injuries but still alive. Tyre tracks found at the scene matched those of an earlier attack. The resulting photo fit bore a strong resemblance to Sutcliffe, as had those from other survivors, and Moore provided a good description of Sutcliffe's car, which had been seen in red light areas. Sutcliffe was interviewed. The police discontinued the search for the person who received the fiver in January 1978. Although Sutcliffe was interviewed about the matter, he was not investigated further and was contacted and disregarded by the Ripper squad on several further occasions. On the 21st of January 1978, Sutcliffe unalived Yvonne Ann Pearson, a 21-year-old worker from Bradford. He repeatedly bludgeoned her in the head with a ball-pen hammer, then jumped on her chest before stuffing horsehair into her mouth from a disregarded sofa, under which he hid her body near Lum Lane. On the 31st of January, Sutcliffe unalived Alina Helen Ritker, an 18-year-old worker from Huddersfield, striking her in the head 5 times as she exited his vehicle and repeatedly stabbing her in the chest. Her body was found 3 days later beneath railway arches in Garran's timber yard, to which he had driven her. Sutcliffe said of Ritker, while in police custody in 1981, Vera Evelyn Millward, 40, was a worker who left her home in Chorlton-on-Medlock at 10 p.m. on the 16th of May 1978, telling her husband that she was going to buy cigarettes. Sutcliffe picked up Millward, and after she got out of his car, Sutcliffe attacked her with a hammer. After she passed away, Sutcliffe dragged her body against a fence and began to stab her repeatedly with a knife. On the 4th of April 1979, Sutcliffe unalived Josephine Ann Whittaker, a 19-year-old clerk who he had attacked on Savile Park Moor in Halifax, West Yorkshire, as she was walking home. Sutcliffe hit Whittaker from behind with his ball-pen hammer and hit her again as she lay on the ground. Sutcliffe then proceeded to stab her almost 30 times with a screwdriver. Whittaker's skull was fractured from ear to ear. Despite forensic evidence, police efforts were diverted for several months, allowing the receipt of a taped message purporting to be from the murderer, taunting Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield of the West Yorkshire Police, who was leading the investigation. The tape contained a man's voice saying, based on the recorded message, police began searching for a man of a Wearside accent, which linguists narrowed down to the Castletown area of Sunderland, Tyne and Wear. The hoaxer, dubbed Wearside Jack, sent 2 letters to the police and the Daily Mirror in March 1978 boasting of his crimes. The hoaxer case was reopened in 2005, and DNA taken from envelopes was entered into the national database. The DNA matched that of John Samuel Humble, an unemployed alcoholic and long-time resident of the Ford Estate in Sunderland, a few miles away from Castletown, whose DNA had been taken following a drunk and disorderly offence in 2001. On the 20th of October 2005, Humble was charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice for sending the hoax letter and tape. He was remanded in custody and on the 21st of March 2006 was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Humble passed away on the 30th of July 2019, aged 63. On the 1st of September, Sutcliffe unalived 20-year-old Barbara Janine Babs Leach, a Bradford University student. Her body was dumped at the rear of 13 Ashgrove under a pile of bricks close to the university and her accommodation. The unaliving of another woman who was not a worker again alarmed the public and prompted an expensive publicity campaign emphasising the Wearside connection. Despite the false lead, Sutcliffe was interviewed on at least 2 other occasions in 1979. Despite matching several forensic clues and being on the list of the 300 names in connection with the fiver, he was not strongly suspected. On the 26th of June 1980, Sutcliffe was stopped while driving, tested positive for drink driving and was arrested. Whilst awaiting trial for this, During mid-January 1981, he unalived 47-year-old civil servant Marguerite Wells on the night of the 20th of August 1980. She left her office between 9:30pm and 10:30pm to walk home in Farsley. He incapacitated her with a hammer blow to the back of the head and continued to strike her whilst yelling beside a driveway. In order to move her 20 yards from the place of the attack up the driveway and into a high-walled garden, he first tied a length of rope around her neck and tightened it. He choked her there, kneeling on her chest, and removed almost every piece of clothing from her once she was unalived, leaving just her tights. He partially covered the body with grass and leaves before he left. On the 24th of September 1980, a 34-year-old doctor from Singapore, Upandara Bandara, was walking home from meeting friends when Sutcliffe followed her into an alley in Headingley, Leeds. He struck Bandara on the head, rendering her unconscious, then, when he was startled, dragged her along the street with a rope around her neck and fled. Maureen Molier, 21, an art student from Leeds University, was attacked by Sutcliffe on the 25th of October 1980. She was in a pub with her friends in the Chapeltown neighbourhood of the city when she was attacked as she hurried down a dark street to catch the bus home. Leah was suffering from significant wounds when she woke in hospital, including a puncture hole to the back of her skull, a fractured cheekbone, a broken jaw, a severed spinal cord, and numerous scratches and bruises. 16-year-old Teresa Sykes was attacked in Huddersfield on the night of the 5th of November 1980. Sykes was going to a shop in Oaks, Huddersfield when Sutcliffe hit her from behind. Sykes' boyfriend heard the screams and ran out, scaring Sutcliffe off. Sykes was recovering from brain surgery when Sutcliffe was arrested. On the 25th of November 1980, Trevor Birdsall, a friend of Sutcliffe's and the unwilling getaway driver in his first documented assault in 1969, reported him to the police as a suspect. In total, Sutcliffe had been questioned by the police on 9 separate occasions in connection with the Ripper inquiry before his eventual arrest and conviction. 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill, a student of the Leeds University, was unalived on the night of the 17th of November 1980. She was returning home to her student's hall of residence in Headingley, Leeds, when Sutcliffe delivered a blow to her head before removing her clothes and stabbed her repeatedly in the chest and once in the eye with a screwdriver. On the 2nd of January 1981, Sutcliffe was stopped by the police with 24-year-old worker Olivia Rainvers in the driveway of Light Trades House on Melbourne Avenue, Broomhill, Sheffield, South Yorkshire. A police check by probationary constable Robert Hyde revealed that Sutcliffe's car had false number plates. He was arrested and transferred to Dewsbury Police Station in West Yorkshire. Sutcliffe was questioned in relation to the Ripper case as he matched many of the known physical characteristics. The next day, Sergeant Robert Ring decided on a hunch to return to the scene of the arrest and discovered a knife, hammer and rope that Sutcliffe had discarded behind an oil storage tank when he briefly slipped away after telling the police he was bursting for pee. Sutcliffe hid a second knife in the toilet cistern of the police station when he was permitted to use the toilet. The police obtained a search warrant for his home in Heaton and brought his wife in for questioning. When Sutcliffe was stripped at Dewsbury Police Station, he was wearing a V-neck jumper under his trousers. The front of the elbows were padded to protect his knees, as presumably he knelt over his victims' corpses. The implications of this outfit were considered obvious, but it was not known to the public until being published in 2003. After 2 days of intensive questioning on the afternoon of Sunday the 4th of January 1981, Sutcliffe suddenly admitted that he was the Yorkshire Ripper. Over the next day, he calmly described his many attacks. Several weeks later, he claimed God had told him to unalive the women. He told the police. Sutcliffe displayed regret only when talking of his youngest victim, Jane MacDonald. Sutcliffe was charged on the 5th of January 1981. At his trial, he pleaded not guilty to 13 charges of unaliving, but guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The basis of his defence was that he claimed to be the tool of God's will. Sutcliffe said that he heard voices that ordered him to unalive workers whilst working as a gravedigger, which he claimed originated from the headstone of a Polish man, Bronislaw Sapolsky, and that the voices were of God. Sutcliffe pleaded guilty to 7 charges of attempted unaliving. The prosecution intended to accept this plea after 4 psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. But the trial judge, Justice Sir Leslie Boreham, demanded an unusually detailed explanation of the prosecution's reasoning. After a 2-hour representation by the Attorney General Sir Michael Havers, a 90-minute lunch break, and another 40 minutes of legal discussion, the judge rejected the diminished responsibility plea and the expert testimonies of the psychiatrists, insisting that the case should be dealt with a jury. The trial proper was set to start on the 5th of May 1981. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and despite the efforts of his counsel, James Chadwin QC, Sutcliffe was found guilty of unaliving on all counts and was sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment. The jury rejected the evidence of 4 psychiatrists who gave testimony that Sutcliffe had paranoid schizophrenia, possibly influenced by the evidence of a prison officer who heard him say to his wife that if he convinced people that he was mad, he might just get 10 years in a loony bin. Justice Boren stated that Sutcliffe was beyond redemption and hoped he would never leave prison. He recommended a minimum term of 30 years to be served before parole could be considered, meaning Sutcliffe would be unlikely to be freed until at least 2011. On the 16th of July 2010, the High Court issued Sutcliffe a whole life tariff, meaning he was never to be released. After this trial, Sutcliffe admitted 2 other attacks. It was decided that prosecution of these offences was not in public interest. West Yorkshire Police made it clear that the victims wished to remain anonymous. West Yorkshire Police were criticised for being inadequately prepared for an investigation on this scale. It was one of the largest investigations by a British police force and predated the use of computers. Information on suspects was stored on handwritten index cards. Aside from difficulties in storing and accessing the paperwork, it was difficult for officers to overcome the information overload of such a large manual system. Sutcliffe was interviewed 9 times, but all information the police had about the case was stored in paper form, making cross-referencing difficult, compounded by television appeals for information, which generated thousands more documents. The 1982 Byford report into the investigation concluded, the choice by Chief Constable Ronald Gregory of Oldfield to lead the inquiry was criticised by Byford. He found Oldfield's focus on the hoax tape wanting, and that Oldfield had ignored advice from survivors of Sutcliffe's attacks. From several eminent specialists from the FBI and the US, from dialect analysis, Stanley Ellis and Jack Windsor Lewis, that Wearside Jack was a hoaxer. The investigation had used the hoax tape as a point of elimination rather than as a line of inquiry, allowing Sutcliffe to avoid scrutiny as he did not fit the profile of the sender of the tape or letters. The Wearside Jack hoaxer was given unusual credibility when the analysis of saliva on the envelopes he sent showed that he had the same blood type as which Sutcliffe had left at the crime scenes, a type shared by only 6% of the population. Humble appeared to know details of the unalivings that supposedly had not been released to the press, but which in fact had acquired from his local newspaper and from pub gossip. In response to the police reaction to the unalivings, the Leeds Revolutionary Feminist Group organised a number of Reclaim the Night marches. The group and other feminists had criticised the police for victim blaming, especially for the suggestion that women should remain indoors at night. 11 marches in various towns across the UK took place on the night of the 12th of November 1977, making the point that women should be able to walk anywhere without restriction, and that they should not be blamed for men's violence. In 1988, the mother of Jacqueline Hill, during an action for damages on behalf of her daughter's estate, argued in the case Hill v Chief Constable of West Yorkshire in the High Court that the police had failed to use reasonable care in apprehending Sutcliffe. The House of Lords held that the Chief Constable of West Yorkshire didn't owe a duty of care to the victim due to a lack of proximity and therefore failed on the second limb of the Capara test. After Sutcliffe's death in November 2020, West Yorkshire Police issued an apology for the language, tone and terminology used by the force at the time of the original investigation. 9 months later, one of the victim's sons wrote on behalf of several of the victims' families. The attitude in the West Yorkshire Police at the time was one of misogyny and sexist attitudes according to multiple sources. Jim Robertson, a senior West Yorkshire detective, told a press conference in October 1979 that the perpetrator, Joan Smith, wrote in Misogynies that at Sutcliffe's trial in 1981, Attorney General Sir Michael Havers QC said of Sutcliffe's victims in his opening statement, this drew condemnation from the ECP who protested outside the Old Bailey. Nina Lopez, who was one of the ECP protesters in 1981, told The Independent 40 years later Havers' comments were, the Inspector of Constabulary Lawrence Byford's 1981 report of an official inquiry into the Ripper case wasn't released by the Home Office until the 1st of June 2006. The sections Description of Suspects, Photo Fists and Other Assaults and parts of the section on Sutcliffe's immediate associates were not disclosed by the Home Office. The Byford report's major findings were contained in a summary published by the Home Secretary, William Whitelaw, disclosing the first time precise details of a bungled police investigation. Byford described delays in following up vital tip-offs from Trevor Birdsall, who on the 25th of November 1980 sent an anonymous letter to the police, the text of which ran as follows. An index card was created on the basis of the letter, and a policewoman found Sutcliffe already had 3 existing index cards in the records. But for some inexplicable reason, said the Byford report, the papers remained in a filing tray in the incident room until Sutcliffe's arrest the following year. Birdsall visited Bradford's police station the day after sending the letter to repeat his suspicion about Sutcliffe. He stated that he was with Sutcliffe when he got out of the car to pursue a woman with whom he had an argument with in a bar in Halifax on the 15th of August 1975, the date and place of the olive smelt attack. A report completed on the visit was lost, despite a comprehensive search that took place after Sutcliffe's arrest, according to the Byford report. Byford said, amongst other things, the Byford report asserted that there was a high likelihood of Sutcliffe having claimed more victims during and before his known spree. Police identified a number of attacks that matched Sutcliffe's modus operandi and tried to question him, but he was never charged with other crimes. Referring to the period between 1969, when Sutcliffe first came to the attention of police, and 1975, the year of his first documented unaliving. The report states, in 1969, Sutcliffe, described in the Byford report as an otherwise unremarkable young man, came to the notice of the police on 2 occasions over incidents with workers. In September 1969, he was arrested in Bradford's red light area for being in possession of a hammer, an offensive weapon, but was charged with going equipped for stealing, as it was assumed that he was a potential burglar. The report said that it was clear Sutcliffe had on at least one occasion attacked a Bradford worker with a kosh. Byford's report states, following his conviction and incarceration, Sutcliffe chose to use the name Coonan, his mother's maiden name. He began his sentence at HM Prison, Parkhurst on the 22nd of May 1981. Despite being found sane at the time of his trial, Sutcliffe was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Attempts to send him to a secure psychiatric unit were blocked. While at Parkhurst, he was seriously assaulted by James Costello, a 35-year-old career criminal with several convictions for violence. On the 10th of January 1983, he followed Sutcliffe into recess of F2, the hospital wing at Parkhurst, and plunged a broken coffee jar twice into the left side of Sutcliffe's face, creating 4 wounds requiring 30 stitches. In March 1984, Sutcliffe was sent to Broadmoor Hospital. Sutcliffe's wife obtained a separation around 1989 and a divorce in July 1994. On the 23rd of February 1996, he was attacked in his room in Broadmoor Henley Ward. Paul Wilson, a convicted robber, asked to borrow a videotape before attempting to strangle Sutcliffe with a cable from a pair of stereo headphones. After an attack with a pen by fellow inmate Ian Kay on the 10th of March 1997, Sutcliffe lost the vision in his left eye and his right eye was severely damaged. Kay admitted to trying to unalive Sutcliffe and was ordered to be detained in a secure mental hospital without limit of time. In 2003, it was reported that Sutcliffe had developed diabetes. Sutcliffe's father passed away in 2004 and was cremated. On the 17th of January 2005, he was allowed to visit Arnsdale, where the ashes had been scattered. The decision to allow the temporary release was initiated by David Plunkett and ratified by Charles Clarke when he became Home Secretary. Sutcliffe was accompanied by 4 members of the hospital staff. The visit led to front-page tabloid headlines. On the 22nd of December 2007, a 4th attack on Sutcliffe was made by fellow inmate Patrick Sereda, who lunged at him with a metal cutlery knife while shouting. Sutcliffe flung himself backwards and the blade missed his right eye, stabbing him in the cheek. On the 17th of February 2009, it was reported that Sutcliffe was fit to leave Broadmoor. On the 23rd of March 2010, the Secretary of State of Justice, Jack Straw, was questioned by Julie Kirkbride, Conservative MP for Bromsgrove, in the House of Commons, asking reassurance for a constituent, a victim of Sutcliffe, that he would remain in prison. Straw responded that whilst the matter of Sutcliffe's release was a parole board matter, an application by Sutcliffe for a minimum term to be set, offering the possibility of parole after that date if it was sought to release him, was heard by the High Court on the 16th of July 2010. The court decided that Sutcliffe would never be released. Mitting said, psychological reports describing Sutcliffe's mental state were taken into consideration, as was the severity of his crimes. Sutcliffe spent the rest of his life in custody. On the 4th of August 2010, a spokeswoman for the Judicial Communications Office confirmed that Sutcliffe had initiated an appeal against the decision. The hearing for Sutcliffe's appeal against the ruling began on the 30th of November 2010 at the Court of Appeal. The appeal was rejected on the 14th of January 2011. On the 9th of March 2011, the Court of Appeal rejected Sutcliffe's application for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court. In December 2015, Sutcliffe was assured as being no longer mentally ill. In December 2016, a medical tribunal ruled that he no longer required clinical treatment for his mental condition and should be returned to prison. Sutcliffe was reported to have been transferred from Broadmoor to HM Prison Falkland in August 2016. Sutcliffe died at University Hospital of North Durham at the age of 74 on the 13th of November 2020, after having previously returned to HMP Falkland following treatment for a suspected heart attack 2 weeks prior. A private funeral ceremony was held and Sutcliffe's body was cremated.